The Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and your local cable provider presents Cable Reports. Join us now as Cable Reports brings you up to date on current issues facing the Commonwealth through discussions with your local legislators and other policymakers from across Virginia.
From the General Assembly and the City of Richmond, I'm Woody Evans for Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast, connecting Virginians to their government. Please welcome Steve Landis. Good to see you, Delegate Landis.
Woody, good to be back with you.
The Education Committee that you chair has been very busy. Tell us about the progress you've made, especially since you have reached the halfway mark, crossover.
We've, I think, had a really successful agenda for the House Education Committee, and we're now working with our Senate counterparts related to education reform. We've continued looking at a new model bill that Delegate Greason has for high school and moving in that direction. We've obviously moved forward with, at least on the House, the charter school legislation or resolution that Delegate Rob Bell had. We've looked at other areas to try to provide more flexibility for our school systems. So I think we've had a pretty good success so far.
Let's talk a little bit more in detail about some of those, especially the charter school amendment, because I think there's some misunderstanding around the intent of that and the impact of it.
Right. Well, a lot of folks, and I know there are a lot of folks that are saying it's going to really diminish the effectiveness or even funding from a public school standpoint. But you have to remember the way it's envisioned is to be a public charter school, so be part of the public school system. First of all, the most important thing is all we're asking for with the resolution is to actually allow the voters, the people that elect us, to decide whether they want us to make the change in the Constitution. And there's no other way to approach that. We've looked at trying to revise our charter school statutes. The Constitution is pretty clear. All the responsibility for whether a charter school can exist or not right now is placed in the hands of the local school boards. And the problem is we only have 9 across the state. The District of Columbia has 36. And so we're falling behind, at least providing that opportunity for parents and local school systems where it makes sense. And what we want to do is at least allow the voters to decide whether they want to give the General Assembly then the authority to make those revisions. And it would have to go through a General Assembly session if the voters approve the referendum to change the Constitution. And then we would have to decide whether we make significant revisions or just tweak current statutes to allow some more flexibility.
So I guess you're going to have to go through this process once more because the resolution failed in the Senate recently.
Well, there's always a chance that some senator may decide to change their vote with the House, the resolution and bill that's coming over that Delegate Bell has. But if that doesn't change, there'll be a chance, obviously, next year to have the resolution considered, and maybe as we have more discussion, maybe there'll be more support for it. But again, it's allowing the voters to have a say on this, and I think that's a good thing.
So what's the value of a charter school? You say there are only 9, but they do provide what, competition and choice?
Well, they provide choice. I think most charter schools in other states, and even the charter schools we have in Virginia, are drawn, and the reason they're called charters because they have a contract that allows them to do things that are a little bit different than the traditional public school, allows them more flexibility, allows more public-private partnership opportunities. Say if a corporation, for instance, we use an example here in Richmond, if there was an opportunity in Richmond to have a charter, a larger corporation could come in and help support that, could be involved in the governance, but more importantly could provide resources for an opportunity that it could be a specialized school or it could just be a school to look at new and different ways of providing educational opportunities for kids.
So that could fit hand in hand to this new paradigm, for example, in high schools in particular, where with dual enrollments you can come out with a certificate in cybersecurity, for example.
That's a great example, and actually would fit in well with the direction we're actually headed, and I think everybody supports in looking at a new model for high school, where kids, especially at the 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, are looking for opportunities through apprenticeships, through internships, through mentorships. And then if you're on a higher ed track, if you will, they could take more classes in dual enrollment with a community college, or even get advanced placement courses out of the way. So maybe they could even have their first year of college out of the way before they, or by the time they get out of high school. And for kids that are on the career and technical track, what they'd be able to do is actually get out and work in the work world, fine-tune their skills, get certifications. Could be cybersecurity, or could be plumbing, or could be carpentry, could be whatever that child's really looking forward to do when they get out of high school.
Now, to what extent does this require a mindset or cultural change? I can tell you, when I was in high school, the trades were looked down upon, and academics was the thing that was emphasized more than anything else.
And Woody, when I was in high school, that was the case. Everybody's child was going to go to college.
Right.
The problem is, when you look at the workforce and the needs, not everybody needs to go to college. If they want to have that opportunity, we want to make sure they have that opportunity. But we also have found from the business community and folks that teach career and technical education, and then partnering with the community college, that most businesses are working for folks that are skill ready, that have certifications, and they can come out and make very, very good livings right out of high school, or at least within 2 years from high school, and making more than kids that are coming out of college that end up working at Starbucks. And there's nothing wrong with Starbucks, I like Starbucks, or places like that, until they can find a job in their career field. And that's the kind of thing that we're trying to prevent, and we want to provide kids in both opportunities that chance to have a head start and really get out and be there from the standpoint of having those marketable skills to get out and actually work.
Yeah, some of the metrics I've seen suggest that in cybersecurity alone, there are 17,000 jobs available now at an average starting salary of $80,000 a year.
You're exactly right. There are fields even in bioscience where you could be a lab technician, and you don't need a college degree, but you need to have those technical skills that you can go out and work and be a lab technician. There are other professions like that as well that are great opportunities. And I always remind people that I still have friends who went through the career and technical field, didn't go to college, and actually some of them later went to college, but they were working in the trades while I was in college, and they were making money. And when I got out of college, they were making more money than I did when I had my first job.
Now, the foundation for all of this, of course, is K through 12. How are the school districts in your district faring?
The school districts in Albemarle and Augusta and Rockingham do a great job, and they're faring well. In fact, Albemarle's got 2 of the charter schools that we have of the 9, and they're providing great opportunity. They do a great job, and that's the thing, I think, with charter schools or some of these education reforms. I don't see it as competition with those school systems that are working. It is an opportunity to actually try to help those school systems that are struggling and really providing more opportunity for kids, and that's what we should be about. We want every child to succeed. We want every child to be able to succeed no matter where they live in the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Now, the second year of the governor's proposed budget has a pay raise for teachers and all state employees. How important is that for teachers?
Teacher pay is a key ingredient, obviously. We want to be competitive. When you look at the national average, I don't like to use that because we've got school systems as big as California and Texas that are much bigger systems, and then smaller ones that get swept in. So you get the national average gets skewed one way or the other. But if you look at the Southern Region education region that we're in, we're competitive, but we need to make sure we're competitive with those states, and there is more that we can do. And I'm hopeful that we'll have additional resources for localities to be able to increase their teacher pay.
Now, the Speaker has proposed a reform commission to look at the Virginia retirement system. Talk to us about why that is needed, and what are some of the challenges that the Commonwealth faces?
The Speaker's proposal is a good one. It allows us to really look in depth at currently what we're doing. You know, we've got the hybrid system now for our retirement system. We've got a benefit package. we looked at that a couple years ago and came up with the plan that we have now, and we're moving in that direction from a defined benefit plan to a defined contribution plan. That's important.
That's more like a 401k, I think.
That's exactly right, and that's what the private sector is doing. It is very hard for states to maintain the older quote-unquote pension plans that many localities and many states had for many years, and it's not as portable. If you look at young people coming out, they want something from a retirement and benefits package that's much more portable and that they can take with them. So that's what we're going to look at. The cost associated with our benefit plans in Virginia are driving a lot of what we have from an expenditure standpoint in our budget. So we've got to get a handle on what is best long-term for the employee, the best for them, and being competitive when you look at other states and what we're providing, not only within state government, but what the localities are providing, what the private sector is providing, and then trying to make sure our workforce going forward, with all those of us that are baby boomers that are going to retire out of the system, that's true in state government as well, so that we can move forward from a cost-effective standpoint, but are the benefits that are going to provide that stability for those employees, and to make sure we're competitive and we can recruit people to stay in state service. And that's a tall order, but that's, I think, the goal of the Speaker's Commission.
And back for a moment to K through 12, how are we doing in terms of further reforms to the standards of learning?
We're making progress. We have the SOL Innovation Reform Committee that's in place. Obviously, we reduced the number of SOLs last year and the year before related to elementary school. They're in effect now. With this new model of high school, we're looking at how we can further basically reduce the number of SOLs in middle and high school. But the challenge is coming up with what is going to be an alternative assessment that we can use to measure how well kids are doing. And if we talk about that new model, if you're doing internships, mentorships, and apprenticeships, we've got to figure out a way to measure how well students are achieving with those kinds of programs. So we've got to come up with an alternative assessment plan that can apply, as I always like to say, from our smallest school systems like Norton or Highland County to the largest school system like Fairfax County.
Now you have some legislation dealing with higher education. What's that all about?
One bill I've got related to higher education, in fact, we just heard today a report on from the Commonwealth poll that VCU does on education. Economic development is important for our state, for job and job growth, but we're now realizing more and more that whether it's community colleges or four-year institutions, they play an important role regionally and statewide in our economic development efforts. So what I have a bill to do is to have the education institutions of higher learning basically report to us on an annual basis as part of their 6-year planning process what they're doing to assist with economic development for their region and for the state.
That's interesting. I think Virginia Tech probably has a good story to tell already.
I think most of our universities, all the universities and colleges have a good story, but the problem is we don't always know that.
Virginia International Trade Authority, you're working on that.
And we've changed that a little bit. That's a bill that will create for the first time what we call the Virginia International Trade Corporation, which is a little bit different version than the original bill, but the intent is the same, and that is to basically bring over our assets in state government related to international trade, put them in a new entity, more like the Tourism Corporation that we set up a number of years ago. It works very effectively, puts emphasis on trade and exports, imports and exports, and basically would allow us to really promote Virginia products and to promote Virginia businesses abroad to come and have folks do business with Virginia in the state. We've got a unit that does that now in VEDP and in VDAX, and we're looking at a plan to move that into a new entity and to really heighten what we're doing. Provide great partnership for the port, and obviously the port's a great asset for bringing goods into the state, but more importantly exporting goods out of the Commonwealth.
Talk to us a little bit more about the Port of Virginia.
Port of Virginia is a wonderful asset, and we've got legislation to help keep the port competitive and to build the next phase, if you will, so we can take bigger ships and those ships that are going to bring in the goods and services and then export those products we have going out, not only Virginia but the United States. And we have about $350 million that we're hopeful that we'll get through the General Assembly that can help expand the port and the Port of Virginia. But this International Trade Corporation could work hand in glove with the port to really promote Virginia and work with making them even more successful.
Yeah, I don't think many people understand how important agriculture is as well, especially in terms of exports.
Exports for agriculture is the market that has just been booming. When you talk to the Secretary of Agriculture and Forestry, Todd Haymore, a friend of mine, soybeans, chicken feed, all sorts of things that you wouldn't think that would be something that we would benefit from are going great guns, and we really benefit from the exports of agriculture products. And more importantly, it helps our farmers, it helps the economy of Virginia, and that's a good thing.
Transportation is still a huge topic here in the General Assembly. How has the 2013 funding mechanism worked out so far?
I think, Woody, overall it's been working very well. It's allowed a system from a regional standpoint and a locality standpoint to really identify key projects that we've had a hard time getting funding for, and getting them to work regionally on those large transportation projects. So it's going to allow us to identify key projects that will help with economic development. We're talking about exports and imports, where you have to have a place where people can move those goods and services up and down a transportation infrastructure, and highways are our way to do that, one of the ways to do that, in addition to our railroads. So it's going to allow that to occur not only in the urban areas, but in the western part of the state. We're talking about projects along Interstate 81 and 64, and that will benefit everyone. But again, those businesses that are trying to move their products to the market.
Of course, the lower gas prices are great for tourism and consumers, but not so good for producing revenue for transportation.
That's the one thing that we're having a little bit of a challenge with, because gas prices are low, and obviously that means the income we get off the gas tax obviously is reduced somewhat as well. But I think that's stabilized somewhat, and hopefully we'll still and we'll continue to get the funding with the changes we made in 2013. That is somewhat mitigated by how we structured that.
Now, House Bill 2, which was passed last year, I believe, set forth a criteria to determine on an objective basis what projects would get funded. And apparently I-66 was selected, but there's been some controversy around that. But I'm happy to report that there's been a compromise. Talk to us about the history of that and what the compromise entails.
Well, during the campaign this past year, there was a lot of discussion about tolling I-66 and the challenges there. And obviously, anyone that travels to Northern Virginia knows that, and for most of us that go up Interstate 81 and then into Northern Virginia, 66 is the route we usually take. And whether it's for meetings or to do business or for the commuters, it's a real challenge with that infrastructure system the way it is now. So what the compromise is to allow tolling at certain points, but it would only occur if certain metrics and measurements are made. And it's basically a compromise that got worked out by both sides, folks in favor and folks opposed to, but it will not allow tolling on certain other feeder roads, which I think was the big concern with the original legislation, but at the same time will allow 66 to be able to be built out, but do it in a way that will be hopefully fairest to those that have to travel it the most, especially the commuters in the Northern Virginia area.
And I understand one of the major complaints was that there was going to be tolling without any improvements. Now at least part of it's going to be widened.
Exactly, and that's the key. And you know, the problem with the older parts of 66, when you get closer into D.C., it's harder to widen those as well and more costly. So I think they've worked out a plan that will benefit folks kind of outside the Beltway area and inside the Beltway as well.
Now, this is going to be done by way of a public-private partnership. We've got examples of that already, primarily I-95, 495, and a lesser experiment in the Hampton Roads area, as I recall. Talk to us about all of those and how those 3P partnerships are working out.
I think they're a great benefit because, again, it allows VDOT to work with the private sector, private providers that are in that business that can build that infrastructure and do it in a way that's probably more cost effective, but obviously the business wants to recoup and make a profit as well. They're in the business to do that. And I think they're moving along and working fairly well. The key, though, is from the state standpoint is making sure from VDOT's standpoint that they keep an eye on those projects and that we're getting the biggest bang for the buck for the taxpayer, and having the infrastructure actually built out that benefits the most people in those regions. And I think those projects are demonstrating that that's a positive and something that's really moving those transportation initiatives forward.
And as a result of other legislation last year, I believe now you as a member of the General Assembly have a say in those projects.
We do, and there's a process for us. In fact, all of us got from Secretary Lane a very thick notebook of all the projects under House Bill 2 that were being considered by the Commonwealth Transportation Board. We get to have input. In fact, I mentioned 81. We've been having meetings this past year with Secretary Lane and the folks with VDOT trying to identify, projects, pinch points, areas that would make a difference. But that will play into now working, we hope, this next year with the localities to maybe move some of those projects as part of the House Bill 2 process as a priority. So it really allows us probably more involvement than ever before, and that's, I think, a positive for both local and state elected representatives.
There are a number of opportunity funds, and back to agriculture, there's one called AFID, A-F-I-D, and I know you have some legislation dealing with that.
I do. Working with Secretary Todd Haymore, I actually had the original legislation that created the Agriculture, Forestry, Industries Development Fund. And basically it's a small grant program, only about $1 million, $2 million a year, that helps businesses that are in agriculture basically either expand and at the same time recruit other businesses and use it as an incentive to come into Virginia to provide agriculture expansion for Virginia, and it's been a great plan. The bill we had this year would allow that for shellfish and commercial fishermen. That was not in there before. The intent was never to exclude them, so we wanted to make sure they had those opportunities. Obviously, those businesses are very important to folks on the Eastern Shore and the eastern part of the state, and provide great benefit to those businesses. So we're going to expand that.
There were a couple of announcements a few weeks ago dealing with cybersecurity. One, where the state of Virginia beat out 48 other states for a new facility at Langley Air Force Base. Mm-hmm. Another one touted a visa facility that's going to be dealing with cyber fusion. Now that presents opportunities for the Commonwealth, but it also points out the need to move to this new Virginia economy.
Well, you're exactly right. I mean, cybersecurity is something that we think Virginia can be a leader in, not only from the standpoint of training young people to come out and be ready for those fields and be prepared to take on those challenges. Cybersecurity is going to be becoming more and more important. We've already seen the kind of downside of people hacking into systems, getting people's personal information. We've had a myriad of bills, whether it's from public education standpoint to businesses that are trying to protect people's identities and information. So it will be beneficial. And Virginia is a leader. If you talk to the technology community, we've got companies that are in that business that have applications that protect people's identity and provide cybersecurity opportunities. And more importantly, I think we can be a leader not only in the United States, but probably in the world. So we're working towards that and trying to provide incentives that will benefit both the businesses and the students and the employees that are in those businesses.
Well, thankfully, we have a pause in sequestration, but we definitely have to start weaning our way away from the Department of Defense, the federal government in general, and encouraging more private entrepreneurship.
We do, and you're exactly right. The governor and the General Assembly agree wholeheartedly that we've got to move folks away from defense contracts and move them more into the entrepreneur opportunities. And cybersecurity is a good example because it has applications, right, obviously for defense, but every business has to basically make sure they're protecting information and that folks are not getting access, whether it's healthcare or education, as I mentioned, or just a business that's dealing with people's credit card information. All that has to be protected and to make sure that it's secure and that people are not getting people's identity and taking them and doing things that they shouldn't be doing.
Encouraging local government, counties, regions to cooperate is a big deal. Go Virginia intends to do that. How is that proceeding?
Those bills are proceeding very well on both the House and Senate side. Obviously, Delegate Cox on our side and Senator Norman on the Senate side have those bills. I think they're pretty much aligned, pretty much alike at this point. So that's going to be a great reform to get localities and businesses, more importantly, to work together to come up with plans on how they can benefit and really improve their economy locally and regionally, and to partner and to come up with a plan. And then the incentive funds that we have at the state level will be looking at those and ranking those on how many jobs we're going to have, how the Commonwealth would benefit, and how the region would benefit. And then the members of the General Assembly will be involved, the administration will be involved, and most importantly, the business community and the localities will be the ones that will be driving that solution to their regional challenges.
Another example of cooperation, bipartisan agreement on a highly charged and emotional issue regarding concealed carry permits and reciprocity with other states. How did this start, and what was the end result?
Well, if you had told me that we would come out of this session with an agreement on that issue, especially related to a Second Amendment issue, which is very volatile usually on both sides, I would have never said that would have occurred, but it did, it has, and those bills are moving forward both on the House and Senate side. There is agreement with the governor, and more importantly, it's going to protect, I think, individuals, and then it's going to protect the rights of the individuals who do want to carry, have concealed carry permits with other states, and it will allow us to not have to address this issue again, which will, I think, be beneficial. The Attorney General's action, many of us felt, was not proper and beyond his scope of authority. But this is a way that we're going to resolve that and do it in a way where both sides, both the House and the Senate, and both Republicans and Democrats have come to an agreement. And actually, even the groups that represent both sides from a political standpoint, whether it's the NRA or groups that are concerned about victims. So I think that's a positive and a good example of bipartisan cooperation. You don't see that happen in Washington.
No, you don't. About 30 seconds left, but good news, revenue projections remain basically the same, correct?
We were very thankful that the governor has announced, and we got briefed just last week by Secretary Rick Brown, that revenues looks like that they're not changing. It's pretty much stable. Some of the revenue sources are going up and down a little bit, but in the end result, we think we'll pretty much be very close to what the revenue estimates are, and we won't have to make any additional cuts based on what the governor proposed in the revenues.
Great. Well, thank you for being with us today, Steve Landis.
Thank you, Woody.
Thank you for watching Cable Reports, brought to you by the Virginia Cable Telecommunications Association and Comcast. Until next time, I'm Woody Evans. Mm-hmm.